The information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. InsideAnalysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com.
InsideAnalysis.com.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks, welcome to the future indeed. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh here on Inside Analysis, the only coast-to-coast radio show all about the information economy. And folks, I get to go on a trip down memory lane today with our guest who knows a lot about a technology that I used to promote years ago, master data management. Master data management, what is that stuff? Master data is very important because it allows you to virtually reconcile information systems. So you have your customer database, your product database, your ERP, your data warehouse, et cetera, all these different systems. Well, many of them are using the same data or should use the same data, but a lot of times it's not aligned well. And so for years, we went through this whole rigmarole of trying to do top-down master data management initiatives to be able to reconcile all these different systems so you can see the big picture. And that's really what it really boils down to, is being able to see the big picture to understand how do all these component parts come together to make the business that we're trying to run here. And obviously, you can imagine that's very useful stuff when it's done correctly. But the top-down approach always had a very, very difficult time because you needed people to adhere to very strict behavioral standards. How many people know people who would like to adhere to strict behavioral standards? Not too many. It's just not a very human thing to do. But people will align if they see the vision of something and understand the value. Where our guest today, Brett Hansen, is the CMO for a company called Semarchy, and they do some pretty clever stuff with bottom-up MDM. And so we're going to kind of tie that into the whole go-to-market theme today about how things are changing and how you have to change your go-to-market strategy to get to the right people. Certainly, if you're in the software world, that's a much different world now than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You know, product-led growth, stuff like that. We didn't have product-led growth 10 years ago. Now it's like a huge thing. A lot of companies do. So without further ado, Brett Hansen from Semarchy, welcome to Inside Analysis. Tell us a bit about your company and the cool things you're doing to help companies get value from their data.
Thanks, Eric. I think you said it really well, that there has been this ongoing effort, and it applies not just to MDM, it's really the data space in general, where it's already been very tops down. It is, we're going to have centralized organizations, we're going to control data, we're going to govern it, we're going to parse out how we get it to different groups. And the fact of the matter is, despite billions and billions and billions of investment, most companies would say we're still not a data-driven organization, right? We're still not making decisions at a practitioner level that are data-driven. Maybe at the top level, they're getting the data they need, but in terms of line level workers, are they able to access data, utilize that data to make decisions to improve customer outcomes, improve patient outcomes, improve efficiencies, improve supply, all those things that we want to achieve with all this data collection? And a big reason why is because we're still taking this top-down approach. Mm-hmm. Our philosophy is the other direction, as you called out. How do we deliver a data product that is specifically designed and delivered for a business requirement? Mm-hmm. And how does that data product then evolve and grow as business requirements change? And that's the Semarchy approach. Let's get into the hands of business practitioners the tools they need to be successful versus try to force them down a templatized, highly regimented approach that has been proven not to work now for decades.
Yeah, I mean, that's such an excellent point. And I think you guys are really onto something here, especially the data product concept. So that is really taking off now. And it's interesting because you've been around as long as I have, I think, or maybe almost, or just about. So you've seen some of these trends come and go. Oh, yeah. Big data, the NoSQL movement, and we're going to forget about SQL. Like, really, are you? And then Snowflake comes along with the biggest IPO in history saying, yeah, actually, SQL still matters. Actually, as a matter of fact, maybe you want to focus on that a little bit. But because here's the thing, the data warehouse, of course, is this large construct that was designed to be able to pull data out of all these different operational systems, put it into a manageable space that we can run analyses on and kind of understand trends and things, because we figured out you can't do analytics on an ERP. It just wasn't designed to do that. It was designed to do the business, to run the business. So that's where this whole thing came from. And then trying to sort of build this next generation of apps, if you're trying to do it again from this sort of top-down perspective, you're nowhere near close enough to ground level where this thing is going to be used. And so, and even thinking of the traditional way of building apps and just connecting it to a database like, IBM or Microsoft Access or whatever, a SQL server, like that has so many limitations in terms of the flow of data and how performant it can be, how malleable it is to be able to do interesting analyses. Whereas if you take the approach that you folks are taking, that Semarchy is taking, and you ask the business, look, what do you need? Then we're going to help you build out an application that will pull whatever data it needs. And by the way, as we're doing that, we're going to be incrementally fashioning your reference architecture, which is basically what MDM is designed to do, right? It's designed to give you a hard and fast reference architecture, but reference architecture is never hard and fast, right? That's the problem, is that they're kind of loosey-goosey, but you'll get them just enough to get their data product. So you've solved the business need. First of all, that's the important thing. Now the business people are happy and they're actually using data, and it's data that is governed and trusted, right? So you've kind of, I'm a football fan, you kind of pulled an end around on this whole thing, right? By just going straight to the users and saying, hey, what do you guys need? Let's build that for you. And in that process, you're on that journey, you're going to be building out what is essentially your MDM architecture. Is that about right?
That's very accurate. And I love the football reference. Not too long before we get back into the season, and it's still done with the data analysts and experts, right? So I don't want to suggest that they're not an important part of this,
right?
But like you said, it's all about understanding what the business objectives are. Right? Do I need a customer 360 view? Do I need inventory view? Do I need a location perspective? And of course, that's only the top level. You're going to get much more detailed. And no two companies are exactly alike. And no two data projects are exactly alike. And so being able to start with a set of reasonable business objectives, defining what those business outcomes are, and then we have a tool, for lack of a better term, that generates the code on your behalf. So we're not writing code. This is code generation.
Interesting.
We can provide typically a first usable solution in less than 12 weeks. So in less than a quarter, we can have something that the business user can get their hands on, start to play with. They're going to have positive reactions. They're going to have adverse reactions. But when they have those adverse reactions, they have, additional requirements. Perfect. We put that back into the tool, build that out, and start to resolve those as we're building out.
Interesting.
And so rather than trying to go a very tops-down, year-long approach, it's, hey, let's get something in the hands of business users in a quarter and then grow and evolve with them, because we know the business isn't standing still during the time that we're doing this implementation.
Yeah. The other interesting thing too is that by starting at this ground level, and of course working with the data people, I appreciate that. You are, number one, you're on the street, right? So you're out there where something needs to happen, right? One of my favorite analysts years ago said something I thought that was kind of profound, almost tautological. He said, look, if something needs to happen in a large organization, it is happening. You just may not know how, but I promise you it's happening. It could be a floppy drive carried across the hall or something. You never know what the workarounds are. But so first of all, to focus on the business value, the tangible business value in the front line, wherever that is, maybe it's in marketing, maybe it's in finance, whatever. But you will learn things as you pull data together from different systems. You'll learn about this system, you learn about that system, whereas with the top-down approach, you're kind of presuming that it's all going to work. And of course, you find in the process that it doesn't always work, but those hiccups wind up being 2, 3, 4 weeks or 2, 3, 4 months that they cause disruption. Whereas in your world, it's a faster path to finishing something. And by the way, learning a lot about these different component systems along the way, right?
Absolutely. And think of this almost like an agile development approach.
Yeah.
Right. So we deploy, we engage, we learn, we adapt, we deploy again. And again, because it's a code generation tool, because I'm not tearing up templates and starting, hiring developers on hand, we can innovate very quickly.
That's interesting.
And I think, the challenge that so many companies have is they've run through an MDM project. It's not like, we have customers come to us like, I never even heard of MDM. No, that's very few. Most of them have used MDM like yourself. It's been around for more than a decade or so, but it was highly templatized, as in highly structured, as in tops down. And it might have worked for their initial engagement. It might have been what they needed at that time. But think of what's happened over the last decade, right? We have much more data and more locations and more silos. The expectations are higher, all those storylines that we hear over and over again. And so an approach that might have been effective a decade or more ago is no longer effective in today's world. And I would argue that it probably never really achieved the outcomes that companies desired, because it was based around, again, a top-down approach. What I find interesting is, we all in the technology industry come back to the technology, right? I got something better, faster. And if you look at data, why have companies struggled with really achieving the data desired outcomes that they have? It's cultural, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of studies out there that, can point to the fact that culture and adoption at the individual level are the biggest inhibitors, right? And so again, that's what we're trying to get overcome, which is, hey, business leader, with your data architect, your data team, let's put together your dream application.
Mm-hmm.
And let's put it together and deliver it in a way that you can innovate and be a part of this, versus, you send over a couple of requirements, you close your eyes, a year later, something big and unwieldy and completely unflexible comes back at you. That's not the right answer.
Right. No, I love that you've got this data products focus, and frankly, I think you're a bit ahead of the curve on that one, because just now companies are starting to figure out, what do you mean a data product, right? And it's interesting because we have this old mindset of application and database. Okay, well, which database are we going to choose for this application? It's like,
exactly, yeah.
Okay, like, databases have their own schema, they have their own performance components, they have their own way of working with them. They're different in many different ways, depending upon what you want to do with them. But now, of course, all this talk about data fabric and some other interesting things going on. Data mesh came along and captured the imagination, even though no one was able to really identify exactly what it is. Like, what exactly are you talking about? So like all these things are happening, but what people really want is a data-fueled product. They want an application they can use to do their job, whatever it is. So it's like really stripping away some of the component parts in our own mental map to understand this is a new generation of functionality. We don't need to think in this linear point-to-point app database mindset anymore. You can think about data products. And as people work with them more and more, they figure out, oh, I understand now. I don't need to have 87 columns and 48 million rows in the thing that drives this particular product. It only needs 10 columns and 250,000 rows or whatever. Where I'm kind of going with this is we have to change the mindset about how applications are built and designed, and how the sort of totality of data has to be appreciated but not consumed at once. What do you think?
Right. Yeah. And that's an evolution. Again, it goes back to people, right? And you're only going to achieve that if you're getting them the tools that they need, versus attempting to subjugate them to some larger approach.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think back, let's do a fun trot down memory lane. Back even in 2000 and, I guess this is like 2008, for a big media company in New York. They were actually my first partner for DM Radio way back then when we launched that. And they were using a relatively new CRM solution, and it was an absolute nightmare, right? So basically almost no one used it. A few people would use it, and the people who used it put tremendous amounts of information in there. So every call, they would put in like 30 paragraphs of stuff, whereas most people would just put a couple things in. And what did you have? You had all of these hard and fast rules, like, no, you must enter the notes field, you must enter this field, you cannot skip that field, and all this stuff. So what happens is people just stop using it, and then it was slow as molasses. I mean, it was brutal. Like, you'd log in and just sit there and wait for it to load for like 30 seconds, 40 seconds. Like, who can do that anymore? You can't do that. You have to be able to move at the speed of your thought, at the speed of emails coming in and people ringing your phone to tell you something has to get done. That's
Yep.
the speed you have to move at. And so that's where these data products come into play, as opposed to the old monolithic application design, which is what we all lived through until the last, 10 years, arguably. Now that we have these much more federated worlds, and we understand that we can leverage that kind of stuff to build these applications, that's a whole new ball game in terms of how you go about designing a data product, how you go about conceiving one of these things, and then of course using it. And that's squarely where you're focused right now, right?
Absolutely. And that's how we measure ourselves is, are we finding our customers are successful in their data initiatives?
Mm-hmm.
So, one is certainly we strive to have functional MDM solutions up and running in 12 weeks. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer, sometimes it goes a little shorter, but that's our goal, right? And we have a contract to that. We actually built out what we call our blueprints, which provide step by step. This is our recommendation based off of literally hundreds of successful MDM projects, how we would approach this. Once we have that and you have your first implementation, I'm not saying it's going to be multi-domain, or I'm not saying it's going to solve every business challenge. It's going to address a critical need where you want to get started. Then we can start to grow and expand. And then we can say, okay, we've solved location-based services. What's next? So, I find the greatest satisfaction when I'm working with customers that, not only started with us and were successful, but we've grown over time. So I think, one of my favorite stories to talk about is Chipotle, something, we all can recognize. They started with us with location-based services. Basically, they were struggling with, okay, where are all of our franchises?
Mm-hmm.
Something pretty simple, right? Not a big deal. We had them up and running in 6 weeks to address that project. From there, most Chipotles have unique menus. We addressed that. Then we said, okay, from menus to ingredients, from ingredients to compliance, from compliance to supply chain. And we're able to work with them throughout this journey. And at every stage, help them find success. Not because we had this massive vision at the start of the project to go and say, hey, we're going to realign all of your data. It is, let us solve a problem. Let us learn from that solution, and then let's go solve the next problem. Again, I almost go back to agile development. It's like, that's the way to go, versus if we had started off and said, okay, we're going to try to reimagine your entire inventory, menu management, compliance all at the same time, we would have failed.
Never happened. No, that's right. Never happened. That's really fascinating stuff. Well, folks, we're talking to Brett Hansen from Semarchy. Don't touch that dial. We're talking all about ground up master data management and data products and how they can help you go to market. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
What if you could own?
Recording stopped.
All right. Good job. One down. 2 to go, or 3 if you have like 6 minutes at the end of the hour. We do what's called a podcast bonus segment. If you can't do it, that's fine. I can do it myself. But basically, we use that content to replace the commercials that run in the live show. That way, the podcast itself is all content and there are no commercials in there.
Well, that's wonderful. I will send a note to my next. I'll be 10 minutes late, 5 minutes late.
Okay, yeah. The next segment starts at 28 past, so we have a few minutes here to kind of strategize. But I tell you guys, I'm kind of upset with myself for not getting a briefing sooner, because that's a very clever approach. And the fact that you said hundreds of successful MDM solutions, I don't know too many companies that can honestly say that.
Well, we have 325-ish, if my last count, active or customers. And 2/3 of those, I can point to some sort of active MDM solution in some way, shape, or form.
That's very cool. Let's talk about MDM and what it means and what it can enable for you. So think of some examples you can share there about how this incremental approach, actually there's a guy I did a webinar with about 2 months ago, brilliant guy, Sarang Bapat was his name. He is the data governance lead at Mitsubishi Electric. And he talked about economies of scale. We all understand economies of scale, but he also talked about economies of learning And there was another one he came up with. I was like, well, that's very interesting. So he's like, everyone knows economies of scale. But one thing that you will learn over time is that something you learned in this project is going to help you learn to do the next project. And that's going to help you do that project even faster, even though it's not the same product or even use the same components. Just that you've learned something along the way is going to expedite the process. So you get better and better at building these things. I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
That is, yeah.
You guys kind of have something along those lines where you're talking about this. I'd like to get into like what you can learn about your data, about your company as you do one of these projects, right? Because if there's an MDM component, that means you're bringing in data from different sources and you're helping to build a product to reconcile those connections, right? To be able to give that clean view. Is that about right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, I mean, we can talk about common use cases. I don't want to oversimplify it, but there's a set of use cases that I would say probably 2/3 of everything we do fall underneath, right? So I'm looking for customer 360. I'm looking for an inventory 360. I'm trying to understand my supply chain. I'm trying to look at location-based services. So those kind of keep coming around consistently. And, how do I start to look at my data differently, which then allows me to start thinking about my business differently, right? So, I didn't want to say this about our friends from Chipotle, but, when we were doing their project is when they had all their lettuce issues with I think it was Listeria or something like that, right? That's what drove all the compliance. They would have never been able to do what they did if they hadn't started off with, mastering their locations and mastering their inventory. And that allowed them to be far more agile in terms of avoiding, okay, I'm not cutting lettuce for every store. I'm just cutting lettuce for the stores that were associated with this farm.
Interesting. That's very good. All right. So we'll come back in 10 seconds. Lead in, stand by.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
Take us to the future.
All right, folks, take us to the future indeed. Your host, Eric Kavanaugh, here with Brett Hansen from Semarchy. We're talking about going to market, and the way you do that is you understand your business better. Quite frankly, that's what this whole data world is about. It's about understanding your business, and we've been talking about master data management and ground up versus top down. And the ground up is great because you learn a lot of things along the way, and then what you learn can help you to design the next data product and the next data product. But I did want to give the audience some background on, what are the kinds of solutions that you can solve using master data management. And you mentioned a couple in the break. 360-degree view of the customer. How long have we been talking about that? For like 25 years, they've been talking about 360-degree view of the customer. And really the whole time it's been about a 36-degree view of the customer. And the other 324 are just waiting. But maybe just explain to the audience how you can enable customer 360 using this kind of MDM data product approach.
Well, it's obviously a topic that's near and dear to my heart as someone that has marketing as part of their responsibilities. How do I understand my customers in a holistic way? And like you said, it's, right now it's 25 or 30 degrees. So first off, we have our CRM system, Salesforce or HubSpot or any of the 46 other CRM systems you use. That's great. That's a great starting point, right? But that in itself is a data silo, right? You're typically going to want to be able to pull in information from whatever system you're using for finance, so I can understand what are my most profitable customers. I want to be able to pull in information from my customer support, which customers are having good experiences, which customers are struggling right now. The last thing I want to do is be sending out some sort of promotional content talking about some exciting new product to a customer who is right now failing to be successful in their implementation. Right. That's going to have a complete opposite experience that we're trying to have. So what MDM allows us to do is starting to get that, what we call golden record. I know it's a cliche, but I can look and say, Eric Kavanaugh, who is he? Not just what his address and email is, but his address and email, how much he's spent with us, what is his customer service experience, what products has he had, what products and services is he using actively. And that allows me to actually drive some really powerful insights into how I approach you versus generic spam email, which of course we know never works or whatever,
Right.
to highly targeted and thoughtful type communications. We work with a lot of financial institutions. That's one of our primary vertical sectors. And what they're looking at is, quite honestly, how do I optimize each and every customer? Because financial institutions, like many institutions, the cost of acquisition is exceptionally high.
Right.
So they're trying to figure out, for every one of my customers, now that I have a portfolio of different financial solutions for them, everything from banking to credit cards to loans to whatever else, how do I bring this to them in a thoughtful way? And it all begins by understanding who they are, what is their current status, what do they have? And without that MDM, you're looking at different pieces. You're now able to have that total 360 perspective that allows you to achieve your goals of being able to deliver targeted solutions, targeted offerings to that customer.
Right. That's right. You're reminding me of how complex the landscape can get. But if you think about the amount of signal that you could acquire from a HubSpot or a Marketo or any one of these other tools, there's a lot of valuable information in there about each individual person who is in the system. Well, you can't just create a pipe from one to the other and expect that data to come through. So what often happens is you'll use that to segment people and say, okay, these are buyers of green clothes, these are buyers of red cars or whatever. That's one path, but that's not really a good path to true rich personalization. For real rich personalization, you need to be able to understand the nature of this person and then connect that to some operational system that's doing the outreach. And that's where these data products come into play, right? So Semarchy comes in and says, okay, we're going to tap into Marketo, we're going to tap into this other operational system that you have and a couple other things, and we're going to give you a view of the world where you can start to understand, hey, I think these people over here are a cohort. Let's market to them now. And I'm an email marketer, so I've been doing email marketing, I joke, for 23 years now, which is about 3 times as long as the average veteran in the field. So I've seen a lot of changes over the years, and it's getting a lot harder to do it. You have to get much better about how on target you are with the message, with when you send things, like all these features that used to be nice to have are now absolute must-haves, or you're going to burn through your list and kill that list. And when a list is killed, it's dead. So this is really important stuff, right?
Well, and I'll take it a step further. It sounds like it should be easy to bring all these different pieces together, right? There's one Eric Kavanaugh, right? Well, is there one? Or is there 3 or 4? And how do I make sure I'm associating these different records appropriately? Maybe you have a different spelling, or maybe you have a middle initial in some of these records, other ones you don't. So it goes a step further in terms of, it sounds like, okay, I can just bring all this stuff together. Well, wait a second. Data is not that simple, right? You've got to be able to go and look at this and be able to understand, all right, how do I bring these sources together so that I do have an accurate golden record? And of course, our systems can help with that. But, that's a really important thought that often gets lost is, oh, it's just, we're just mashing all this data together. No. There is a lot of data quality that gets built in here to make sure that what is golden is truly golden.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the other very interesting thing. So to get back to MDM top down versus bottom up, well, what happened in the old days is that you would do your requirements gathering, you look at all the systems you want to reconcile, you begin this big project to do all that at some sort of foundational level. Well, what you're actually doing by taking this start small, and everyone says that, start small, right? Don't boil the ocean, and yet you get people boiling the ocean. So you got to start small. But you're going to learn things about each and every one of these data sources that is going to be very valuable for the second and third and fourth data products that you generate, and also will be valuable for the teams who own these different systems. Say, hey, did you guys know that you have this concatenation problem in this field, and we're missing that data when we come over, right? That's what all this observability stuff is about, to see what's going where. And because you've taken this, I think, very clever approach of start small, build incrementally, you're learning a lot all along the way, such that each subsequent project becomes a little bit easier and a little bit easier. And that's how you build momentum in the organization. That's how you help your clients go to market with their technologies and their solutions, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And that concept of learning as you go is so important, right? Because we all start every project by assuming that we have all the answers.
Right.
And what we find very often is after the first phase, again, ideally 10 weeks or so, we get it into hands and we learn from that. And then we can adapt and grow. The other thing, which I've mentioned it once, I'm going to stress it again, business is continuing to change.
Right.
Right. We actually were with a customer working on their implementation, and halfway through the implementation, they acquired another company. That obviously has profound implications to what we're trying to achieve, right? So we had to take a step back and say, okay, what do we want to do? That project was not 12 weeks, I'll be honest, because we kind of pushed it out further because we had to think about what are the implications? How is this going to work? What new data sectors are we going to go? And again, trying not to boil the ocean, but you needed to be cognizant of the broader business requirements that had changed post making an acquisition.
Right. Yeah, that's a big deal. And I'm connecting some dots in my head here as you're talking, and I'm realizing the importance of change and the importance of appreciating change. I was talking to some VCs probably 6 months ago, and this one guy made a really good point. He said, we know that whatever we design today in 6 months is going to be disrupted. So how do you plan for that? I mean, how do you plan for the whole market changing? And then, of course, since that time, the large language models took center stage. So they had been around, ChatGPT 2 and 3, et cetera. It's not new, but when OpenAI rolled it out, that was a huge eye opener, one of the biggest I've ever seen in terms of just shaking the foundation of what is accepted as normal, what is accepted as the way to do business. We're going to go through, I think, probably a 2 to 5 year period now of just remarkable bottom line day-to-day workflow transformation because of these engines and because what they're capable of doing. But that change is really important, and it's very important for marketers and for salespeople to kind of understand this. Like you think about, so let's get back to 360 view of the customer. Let's do 360 view of the prospect, right? If you're trying to figure out who to market to, who to spend time and money building content, sending information to, et cetera, well, you really want those teams, those go-to-market teams, to be able to fail fast forward, as they say. You want to be able to try lots of different things and see what works and what doesn't work. Now, there is something to be said for consistency and newsletters that go out once a week and things of this nature. But these days, man, you better be trying new stuff to get through to people, or you're going to be in trouble. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the continuous innovation is certainly part of everything we're doing today. From a marketer perspective, ChatGPT and these other AI tools are truly changing the landscape. We use them in a number of different ways at Semarchy, and we're a relatively small company. And I can tell you that they've already had profound implications in terms of how I spend dollars and how I execute. But I also have learned that, like with any new technology, you have to be careful about embracing adoption, right? So there's lots of great opportunities for utilizing it and helping streamline content production, helping you become more targeted in your outbound. But at the same time, like I've always said, new technology has to be vetted and thoughtfully applied, or it can be more detrimental than beneficial.
Sure. Yeah.
So
we've seen some of that with the large language models already, with the hallucinations, right?
Yeah.
Because they are generative. So it's funny, I was covering the Databricks conference, their Generation AI conference, and the girl was talking about how she was doing a demo about how they train the models, and et cetera. And, my wheels are always spinning like, okay, well, how much time is it going to take to train these models? And, where does the value really accrue and go beyond just solving some small problems? Like, where do you actually get the inflection point where this thing takes off? Well, that's going to be a while, I think, with many of these, for the reasons that you've outlined. But while I was tweeting about this, someone from ChatGPT on Twitter came back and said, hey, wait a minute, we don't use that data for our models. Databricks knows this, et cetera. So here we are in this real-time conversation with the major players in the space. And I chose, because I'm a journalist, to ask a few more questions. I said, well, what do you do about hallucinations? And he said, remember, these are really more of a feature than a bug, right? This is what these things are designed to do, to fuse together different vectors of information to create prose that will ideally satisfy the request in the prompt, right? Well, There are lots of ways you can do that. And we talked about it on other shows, but you can either embed your corporate data into the model, which is a pretty complex thing to do, or you can use a vector database and kind of get this anchor of truth, which I think is probably the clever way to go. But in that sense, you can start leveraging these things. And, to your point, you do have to be careful, like walk through step by step, make sure you know what you're doing. But the power of these things to just look at the world in a different way. I mean, I was a philosophy major many years ago, and our teacher used to always say different perspectives, like that's what you want. And I think you're kind of singing that tune on the people front, right? Is you want to talk to the people. Who are these people that we're working with, and understand they're all different. Every data project is different. Every person is different. So that seems to be core to your approach for working with them, right?
Absolutely. And I think going back to the AI piece, it's something which is almost every conversation we have with customers that gets brought up. People are excited about it, right? This is game changing. This is the next evolution of our economy, from industrial to digital to now AI based. We've taken a very pragmatic approach, and we actually have an open architecture, so you can plug into ChatGPT and utilize ChatGPT as part of your MDM project. We've long been able to tie into Google Translator and AWS recognition. So we've long sort of said, like, hey, our belief is there are great tools out there to help enrich your data. Utilize them. Right. Versus jumping down the path like you were talking about of saying, okay, we're going to embed a bunch of AI technology within our MDM, and then it becomes a black box.
Yeah.
And where that scares me is, okay, if I don't properly train that, is that going to have implications to compliance or security or accuracy? And especially given the fact, as I mentioned, we have lots of customers in finance. We have lots of customers in healthcare. Like, making mistakes there, pretty catastrophic type situation. So our perspective is, there are some really exciting things that are going to be coming with AI and ML. The ability to do match and merge, to have streamlined anomaly detection and correction. Huge implications, outstanding. But just like with everything else, it is going to need to be unique to that individual company. Certainly that individual, sector at the very least, but ideally that individual customer, because if not, okay, well, now we have compliance implications. Now we have security implications. Now we have accuracy, and that, so it's exciting, and we're like embracing that, the potential here, but we're doing it, as you said, in that vector database sort of approach, which is, don't make it a black box. Don't build this so deeply into your environment that I don't actually know what's happening. You're going to need to have still controls over that, and build it in just like everything else, which is, have an incremental plan to go and be able to embrace.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Incremental plan. That's what you want, folks. Don't boil the ocean. Never boil the ocean. Step by step, iterative development. That's what they call it. Well, folks, don't touch it down. We'll be right back with Brett Hansen of Semarchy. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanaugh.
All right, folks. Back here on Inside Analysis, talking all things data products and master data management, top down or bottom up. Bottom up is the way to go, folks. Top down, we tried it for years. There are whole companies that disappeared that did MDM. They're not even around anymore because they were doing the top down. Not a lot of people like that. But we're talking to Brett Hansen of Semarchy, and he's getting me all excited about data products, and to kind of put this back into the go-to-market framework. Going to market is a very interesting and, I would say, sort of dicey enterprise these days, because you have so many options about where you can spend money. You have so many ways that you can do things now, all these different social engines. Of course, you've got first-party data, email marketing, traditional stuff, conferences, going to talk to people, getting your messaging right. Well, data products can be extremely valuable in terms of understanding that, in terms of developing your go-to-market strategy, even if it's just understanding where are people coming from. When people interact with us, what is the preponderance of people who are calling us on a call center versus coming into stores like Chipotle versus on the app or social or whatever? Just understanding how people get to you is a data product, right?
Absolutely. And I think that, marketing, go-to-market continues to evolve very rapidly. And it is easy to be overwhelmed by the information that's available, right? So, any channel you can look at 15, 20 different data points that can tell you how to optimize PPC or your webinar spend or your emails or your face. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And what I try to bring my team back consistently to is, what does your prospect or your customer need? Provide value to them. I know we think our job is to market to them and sell to them and try to force them down our imaginary buyer's journey. Our real responsibility is to help them with whatever tasks they have in front of them. It might be the fact that we're not the right company for them, and what our help is to point them in some other direction. But, ideally, we're providing valuable information that helps them along their buyer's journey, not ours, theirs.
Right.
Now, would I like for that buyer's journey to ultimately, be a product purchase for my company? Absolutely. Do I feel confident that I have a great product? Yes, I do. But that doesn't mean that I should be forcing my views down their throats. Right.
That's
so the
really
whole
funny.
concept of the golden rule and really trying to understand what they need and then being able to speak to them in their language and at their point in their buyer's journey is absolutely essential.
Yeah, that's right. I just wrote this down. Our Imaginary Buyer's Journey. That's a book title, by the way. That's a very book title. I like that you're honest about recognizing that, yes, every company will have their imaginary buyer's journey, what they think people are going to do to get to them. And sometimes you're right, and sometimes you're not right. But you do have to keep an open mind that people come to you various ways. And then people use the technology in different ways too. I mean, one of the coolest things about software that I've learned, it was actually the MDM company in particular, is that you can have your thoughts about how people are going to use your tech. And then you'll do a user conference and you get all these people coming to you, showing you things that you never imagined, which are possible because of your tech. So yep. I would tend to think that's especially true with you guys, because again, you're focused on building data products, right? And the thing is, you don't have to do some sort of one-to-one map between the data product and an Excel spreadsheet, which is kind of how people still think in terms of accessing data for the app, right? Don't think of it that way. We've had data marts, for example. We've had OLAP cubes. There are all these sort of constructs we've come up with over the years, but they're all fairly linear and staid, I guess. Whereas what's interesting about your approach is that you're working with the business to figure out how to solve some particular challenge. And let's say it's this understanding your prospects. So we could do go to market. Well, who are our prospects? You sit down, you look at what are the prospect databases, our email database, our social media feeds, things of these nature. These are all the sort of entrance points. But who is coming here? How can we analyze this? Can we get web trends data to see who is clicking, who's not? What are the URLs pointing to us? All this stuff, which lives in lots of different silos, doesn't have a lot of value until you've pulled it together in some meaningful way. And that's what you're doing with these data products, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we actually have an MDM project going on in our way in our own company. So we're a relatively small company. I mean, we're not, global 50 type company. We're talking about hundreds of employees. As I said, we have a few hundred customers globally. But we have found actually that even we have the need to really be able to bring all these different data sources together so that I can have more intelligent conversations with my customers and prospects. And I think that's the key. Is it's not I'm marketing to them, it's not I'm selling to them. I'm trying to have an intelligent conversation so that I can help provide them what they need.
Right.
Now, in that process, I am learning more about them. I am gathering more information about who they are and what business challenges they might have, what technologies are utilizing, so I can become a better communicator back into them, while at the same time, progressing them ideally through a buyer's journey that ultimately results in a sale with us. Mm-hmm. But as I mentioned, and you called this out, I thought really well, because we have a data product, and yes, there are certainly use cases that are consistent, like Customer 360 or Product 360, but even then, that spans a tremendous amount of range, right? What I consider to be a Customer 360 might be very different than, a financial institution that's global versus a mid-tier bank. I mean, they all have different requirements. And so I can't force my perspective onto them. I can provide them with information, education, and tools to help them learn, but I can't be, our way is the only way.
Yeah.
And I think that's how we have found success. Is it's a massive market out there. There's a lot of noise. As you mentioned, the market has been a top-down approach for a decade. And if you look at the largest customers or companies, that are servicing MDM, they're all tops down. And they have a lot more money to spend, and they're going to tell everyone that this is the best way to do it. And I can't compete with that, but what I can do is provide an educational package back into the marketplace saying, okay, that's an option. Here is how we approach things, and here are some of the best practices that we have. Hopefully this will help you learn as you're going through your buyer's journey.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I love this quote you just said, I can't force my perspective on them. And that's very smart, right? They're coming to you because they want to solve some problem. Maybe they had a different problem to solve before they started talking to you, but it's in the conversation, the meaningful, intelligent conversation, that you can come across certain touchstones and then leap forward. They'll mention something about, oh, what this friction point we have. Oh, what is that about? That's when you can kind of dig in, and you do have to share information. You have to share your insights. It's not like the old days of just showing someone a brochure and say, oh, here, buy our product online. I mean, you're talking about complex enterprise software that is designed to give a better view of a particular business aspect, is really what you're talking about. But
Absolutely.
That's been the vision all along. Like, that's the funny thing, is that was the vision even in the top-down monolithic age. It's just that you had to hope that someone on the client, on the vendor side, would listen to you enough for your feature to make the next release, right? And how often was that? Not very often. And so you're kind of, again, pulling an end around on that old monolithic waterfall approach to building things. And you're saying, no, we can build you a product. It'll only take 6 to 12 weeks or so, and you'll have something functional. And by the way, along that path, you're going to get better and better at really understanding what your de facto reference architecture is. It's going to be unique. It's going to be different than anyone else's in the world. And thus, the more intel you gain about your environment, the better off you're going to be for the next data product and the next data product, right?
Yep. Every company, every solution is a snowflake. It is unique, right? And if you think about it that way, you think about, and we say this all the time, data is the blood of your organization, right? It's what drives your decisions, what helps you differentiate yourself from your competitors.
Right.
If that's really true, then you're going to need a solution that's unique, bespoke. And you're not going to achieve that if you're starting off with a template tops-down approach.
Right.
Being able to generate a bespoke application that services your specific business requirements, whether, again, that's a customer 360 or a location, inventory, product. That's what's going to allow you to be successful. And it's not a single exercise. It's a journey. We're going to be on a journey with you to help you achieve your business outcomes.
Yeah, and the difference in when you use this term, because I've heard that term before, talk about things changing over time. The difference is that 10 years ago, that journey was going to be like 6 months to 2 years, and it was going to be to stand up one big honking thing that was going to allow you to do all sorts of amazing magic with your data. And that is not the correct path. Like, what you want to do is have a journey where you get small wins, then bigger wins, then bigger wins, but targeted, focused on particular business use cases, solving problems for the business while you're incrementally building out what is essentially your de facto data fabric. But folks, what a fantastic conversation with Brett Hansen. Send me an email. You're listening to Inside Analysis.